Hey guys, welcome back. The funny thing is, we don't have a new Dead City episode or any TWD episode this week, but I have lots to talk about. It kind of feels like ever since the finale of that, they've been really pushing some of the Daryl Dixon stuff. So I have plenty of asks and people who have sent me things and tagged me in things, and thank you for doing that. I will get around to it all eventually, but I may not get to all of it this week. So we're just going to dive in. We're going to start with the release of the first 5 minutes, the teaser from 301 from Daryl Dixon. So Obadella 2 says the first 5 minutes of Daryl Dixon season 3 is up on AMC Plus. Have you seen it and are you going to analyze it? Yes, I will do that today. Um, the much talked about I was pretty young when all this started is one of the first lines of the season. Unfortunately, still no official age drop though. Just you know I was pretty young when all this started, never got to do much, never had much. And then they are already getting into how they've just been surviving and not really living. Specifically, that Daryl is tired of surviving and wants to start living. Sound familiar? So, right at the forefront, it's identifying Daryl's age and most likely the theme for the season, living, not surviving. There's also an obvious clock shot of Big Ben at the end. It reads either 1:55 or 11:05. I think it's 11:05. Have there been specific clock times that stand out? Does someone have screenshots of every clock in Still and Grady episodes? I don't know about that, but I do have some of them, so we can look back through them. We're always paying attention to the clock times. And remember that Gimple specifically told us to pay attention to the clock times, especially in Slabtown. Someone asked him because they zero in on the clocks there when she's waking up. Someone said, "Is there something significantly, symbolic or something like that about the clocks?" And he said, "Yes." But he's never told us what the clocks mean. So we're always zeroing in on the clocks. And I will say that they're not always just TD things. One that we figured out uh, way back when there was a clock, it had to do with Carl. And it was when Carl like hitched a ride in the back of the Savior's van and went to the sanctuary, and then Jesus was in there too. There was a clock behind them. I think it said 8:30, which would be halfway through the hour at 8, and then that was where Carl died. And so we kind of figured that clock was foreshadowing his death. Anyway, so I think they used them for a lot of characters. Anyway, let's get into the I just did some pictures. All right, so it starts out with water and a lighthouse, and I think that's really significant. The lighthouse could very easily represent Beth. In fact, Norman called her Daryl's light in the darkness, right? Which is pretty much the function of a lighthouse. And then, of course, we just have the ocean and even these cliffs, which are white and green, are really kind of making me side eye. Just the color scheme. And I mean, the fact that they could have filmed this opening anywhere. They might have wanted these because they're iconic and they're very beautiful and everything, but it's not like they actually have a scene here, right? They don't even really talk here. We just see them walking. Um, so they could have done this anywhere, but they specifically show them walking along the coast, which probably, at least to some extent, symbolizes them wanting to go back over the ocean to get home. Um, but again, this was something that was out of their way, and they're trying to show lighthouses here, right? Then we see this shot. So obviously they've moved away from the coast at least a little bit. They're moving inland. And we do have the stream. We have the church. That's like the big one for me is that next it's showing the lighthouse, it's showing the church. I'm going to come back to that. Keep that in mind. The sequence I think is interesting here. Then we see them crossing a bridge. I've talked about a bridge a million times, right? The bridge is a big deal in terms of Beth symbolism. And then we finally get them starting to talk. I'm sorry, this picture is blurry. They're moving. I had a hard time getting a decent screenshot, but Carol is holding a can of canned hot dogs, right? And she's asking, do you think these are good? He says, no, probably not. But the hot dog is still dog symbolism, right? And we've even talked about before how hot dog, I mean, it's kind of a goofy, tongue-in-cheek symbol for maybe fire and dog, hot dog. And so, yeah, I know it sounds a little bit cheesy to anyone who's not on board with the serious symbolism, but this is not the first time that we've even discussed this. I can't remember what other episodes there were hot dogs in, but I know that we have discussed hot dogs as fire and serious symbolism before. So it's not the first time. I just don't remember the specific episode. Anyway, and he says, or she says, do you think this is good anymore? Probably not. So let me go to this is something that W.D. Way said. She says, Carol talks about wondering if the can was still good, and Daryl saying probably not. Could Beth still be alive good? Daryl not having any hope says probably not. Um, and then Carol can't even remember her last hot dog. A hot dog would be the same as a serious dog, wouldn't it? I'll answer that myself. Hell yes. So I actually agree with her here. I think all of the dialogue is symbolic and is pointing to something. Um, so say, the way that W.D. Way interpreted it is that this is almost like saying, do you think Beth is still alive? No, probably not. But it'll be interesting to see if they actually do anything with these hot dogs, because especially if they open them up and they are still good, then that's really going to confirm that WDWA is interpreting this correctly. I did think of something else too. I was thinking that it might be a reference to how they find Beth. And here, let's go a little bit further before we get into that. So she says we should hang on to them in case we need them in an emergency or to trade. I'm not sure about that line. I feel like it's significant, but I'm a little unsure about how to interpret it. Um, Hanging on to it because it's valuable, I guess, or also suggesting, I mean, the trade, you could think about the prisoner exchange at Grady, that sort of thing. I just think they're hinting at things, but it's hard to know exactly what they're going for. Then they talk about how this place is really strange. I think this has a little bit more to do with the actual plot that's going on because they haven't found anybody. And Carol says maybe they're all in a safe zone somewhere, which actually is a callback to Alexandria. But he also says there aren't any walkers, and that's really strange. So I'm assuming we'll figure out what this is all about and why this countryside is so quiet here. Then she passes the car and says, what's strange is the steering wheel is on the wrong side. So me and my fellow theorists talk about this too. They've been in Europe for a while, so it's not like Carol's just now realizing that they drive on the opposite side from how people drive in the US. And yeah, I mean, she's trying to make small talk and just have something to say, make conversation, but it still feels very intentional. Um, you know, Beth being left in a car has always been something that we've harped on, right? And so it's a reference to the car they're passing and being on the wrong side. I mean, we've always looked at things, especially like side A versus side B or path A versus path B, as being like the wrong, like something's just wrong. Something didn't go right, and it's because they all think Beth's dead when she's really not. And we've talked about things like that for years, that being the case. Um, but I also feel like this could be a foreshadow of her being on the wrong side. So it could be like saying, what am I trying to say here? Like the steering wheel on the wrong side is them sort of misinterpreting what happened with the car when Beth was left in it, that everything was all wrong. And they thought that she had turned into a walker and really she hadn't. So you see what I mean? The steering wheel's on the wrong side. They went in the wrong direction with that sort of thing. But I also wonder if when they find her, if she's like, as we've talked about before, if she's with a group that is technically quote unquote bad, or they feel like she's with an enemy group of some kind, then it could also be a reference to that, like she's on the wrong side or they're on the wrong side from her or something like that. And then another thing that W.D. Way noticed is right here, I don't know if you guys can see me, across from the car, this little triangular shaped divot that goes out in the bridge is actually a chevron sign. Now I don't know if I've talked about chevrons all that much in my videos, but it is a big deal. There were chevrons on Beth's sweater. We've done actually pretty extensive metas and things into the chevron sign. So I will see if I can find some and link them in the show notes if you want to read them. I really should go back and do videos on them. But anyway, so it's like we have all of this symbolism together stacked on top of each other, right? So we had the lighthouse, and then we had the church, and then we had the bridge, and now we have a car with the steering wheel and the hot dog, and now the chevron, all of that together. And so I liked in the ask that you said that they're kind of establishing the theme for the season. I agree. But having all of these symbols together, it really is making me think that they are hinting about what's coming this season. And I do think that it's Beth. So this is really exciting. It's really fun. And then I also wanted to point out the sequence, because if we go back a few pictures here, So we have, to go back to the beginning, we have the lighthouse, like I said, symbolizing her being his light in the dark, right? And then we've talked about water and the ocean being a big symbol for her. I feel like that could represent season 4 because that's when she became his light in the dark. Let's put it that way. Um, and then we have the church. We believe that they tried to bury her at a church and everything that happened there. You could also look at Father Gabriel's church. That's what kind of happened next in season 5. Then we have the bridge. We literally had Daryl and Carol falling off a bridge and consumed, but the bridge also represents what happened with Beth. And then we have the Sirius symbolism, meaning she's going to go away and come back. And then we have them talking about the car. So we have maybe them leaving her in the car and something being wrong about that, right? And then we have the chevron. So I just feel like they're almost revisiting the sequence of things that happened through these images that we're seeing. And of course, they could also be foreshadowing what's going to happen in the season. Same thing here. She asked about his shoulder. Yeah, the knife didn't go in very deep. But I mean, essentially, she's asking if he's okay, and he is now. He's, that could be about Beth. That also could be about Isabel, lots of things. So then she starts talking about his brother. Now, this part's really interesting. First, she says Codron really flipped out, and he says, yeah, he thought he saw his brother. Now, if you watch Daryl's body language in this part, you can tell he's kind of uncomfortable with what Carol's saying, like almost like he's taking it personally or almost like she's criticizing him, which she isn't. But I think what he's thinking is that Codron flipped out, but so did he because he hallucinated Isabel. And so he's feeling a little bit self-conscious about that, maybe. So he's actually defending Codron, which is interesting because Codron pretty much tried to kill him, right? Even if he wasn't really in his right mind. But Daryl isn't angry with Codron. He's actually defending him, and he says, "Yeah, he was because of his brother. He thought he saw his brother, and then it's the bat guano messing with your head." And then she says, "Yeah, I guess that's why they call it batshit crazy," which is funny. Like that's a funny joke, but still, he's not laughing. Like he's not very comfortable with this conversation. And I'm not sure if that's just again because he hallucinated too and is feeling like maybe there's something wrong with him or something like that, But then this is where he starts talking about Merle and his age, right? I was pretty young when all this started. It was just him and his brother against the world, and then the world changed. He never got to do much, never got to have much. And she says, it's a lot we lost. And so before we go on to the next part, the thing that strikes me about this is that yeah, I mean, they were talking about Codron and his brother, and that's what segued into talking about Merle, but it's still a pretty random thing to talk about here. Um, I mean, when I was first watching it, I was going, what even brought that on? What made him think of his brother? And yeah, I mean, I went, oh, okay, well, I guess they're talking about Codron and his brother, so okay. But it still feels, I don't know, just a little bit contrived to me in that the writers really wanted us to go here. Like there's a reason for it. They're being very intentional about it. And I almost wondered even if, so there was that script that leaked from season 2 in which he mentioned Merle and Glenn and Beth. And then that didn't actually happen. That line was not in the episode. And so I almost wondered if they put this here because they didn't use that other line and they're still trying to put things in, but still avoiding saying Beth's name. Anyway, so it's just kind of interesting, but again, it's just you can understand that he's talking about this here because they were talking about Codron and his brother, but he didn't hallucinate Merle, right? That was not what he hallucinated when the bat guano was getting to him. He didn't hallucinate Beth either. It was Isabel, but we kind of know that Isabel was a stand-in for Beth. She had the exact same scars on her wrist. It's really hard to get around that, And he even talked to Beth about Merle. So anyway, all I'm saying is that I feel like they are hinting at things, but in a very roundabout way so that it's not obvious. And yeah, like you said, this is him also saying that he was quite young when this happened. What I've been seeing a lot of people saying, and I concur, is that especially when you get to be middle-aged, like late 30s, early 40s, you don't say you were super young at that age. And even people who are older than that, people who are 50, 60, 70, they don't talk about themselves as young people when they were 45. I don't know, maybe some really elderly people do that, but even then they're usually joking. Usually when you talk about yourself being young, it's either in your 20s or younger, teenager or 20s. So for him to say I was pretty young when this happened is a really big hint that he was probably supposed to be in his 20s. And that's still older than Beth was when the show started. So there still is a little bit of a gap, but it's not as big as most people try to make it out to be. So yeah. Then he says, here's the brother and I against the world, and then the world changed. Now all we do is run and fight. That ain't no way to live. You ever think about that? And she says, yes. So yeah, you're right. This is something that, I mean, again, it's a show-wide theme, living versus surviving. So we've seen it around a lot of people, but we did specifically see it around Beth. So it's still another callback to that. And then he just kind of goes, I don't know. And they keep walking again. So again, it just feels like this really kind of random conversation between them in which they're definitely dropping all kinds of callbacks and important dialogue and symbols and all kinds of stuff. Let's see. Then, of course, we get to the actual city and the checkpoint. So what I notice here, let's see, Carol saying, I keep thinking about how far away from home we are. And home is an interesting symbol too. Obviously, she's talking about their literal home back, in the States, but I still feel like this is a significant line. We've a lot of times said that Beth equals Daryl's home, just because in the show, symbolically, home is where your family is, right? It doesn't really have to be a geographical place. But this may be a hint that he's close to finding her. Hopefully, that's what it means. You said it was hard being there. And then she says, yeah, but after everything, I'm really, really ready to get back. And he says, yeah, me too. I notice here that not only do we have the walkers, we have a lot of tires. And tires are another one that I don't talk about a whole lot, but they are actually a symbol. A tire coming off a car is sort of like, I mean, that's what kind of derails the car and there's a problem and they have to stop and fix it, right? So I do think that represents some sort of, I don't know, bump in the road or something that slows them down or something that goes wrong. And it's not that we specifically saw this around Beth, but I've seen it since then around symbolism that is Beth's symbolism. So anyway, that's all. And there's just a big emphasis on tires here as they reach the checkpoint. There we go, another one, people who have been shot, and then just lots of tires laying around. But they end up going through the checkpoint into the city. And the other big thing here is that they really focus for a minute on this tank that's on the left side of the screen here. Even after Daryl and Carol walk by, it sits there on the tank for a minute. And I think that's really important. We had, in Diverged, we had those military walkers that Daryl kept interacting with. And I wonder if that symbolism is about to be fulfilled here, like whatever that was about. There's been a few times that we've seen military-ish things in France, Jeanette's people were kind of military-ish, but at the same time, it didn't ever really feel like a super big light bulb, oh, that's what that was about kind of moment. And now here they're really focusing in on this green tank. So I kind of think that that symbolism hasn't actually been fulfilled yet from Diverged, which is interesting because it just shows that, assuming that I'm right about that, it shows that the symbolism in Diverged was kind of all over the place, and it wasn't necessarily in chronological order, in the order we would see it fulfilled in the show, because at the very beginning of Diverged, Daryl and Carol part ways, with him going one way and her going the other. And I 100% believe that that was to foreshadow that she was not going to be in the first season. They were going to be apart for a minute. But then we see him doing all this other stuff that we believe is Beth's symbolism, but obviously we haven't seen that be fulfilled yet. So this just kind of goes to show that, anyway, that there's still a lot from that episode 2 that we haven't seen the fulfillment on. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. Sorry, back. We have another bridge here. They're making their way across the bridge into the city. And then, like you said, there's Big Ben. I do think that it is 11:05. And what to make of that time, I don't know. I feel like sometimes the minute hand is more important than the hour hand. And in this case, I mean, it really could just be that, I mean, the minute hand, yeah, it's pointing to 5 minutes after the hour, but it's also pointing to the 1. And this is Daryl Dixon, episode 1 of season 3. So I don't know. We'll have to keep an eye on it and see if we can figure out anything more specific for that. So yeah, that's kind of my analysis of what I have here. Gladriel Jones says, "Hey guys, I just watched the preview. Still not caught up on DC, but I have been paying attention to the Daryl Dixon stuff. All the talk about how Daryl used to be young is really interesting. Like immediately calling backwards. Daryl's lament that this is no way to live also makes it feel like he's getting back to the mindset he was in with Beth at the funeral home, and of course, Beth's line, 'You call this living?' I'm also interested in how the heck they got to Westminster or why they're there. But Carol mentions the Scot, and I'm likely forgetting something. The Channel should take them to London. Westminster interested me because it recalled the famous Westminster Dog Show, which would be the second dog reference in the clip. So yeah, interesting, interesting. Um, she also says this poster intrigues her. Riding into the sunset with a church up on the hill. People have pointed out that church to me more than once. And yeah, I think it could be, even though it's like a Spanish style church, it still could be symbolic of, the church from season 5, like it's always there in the periphery. Um, Riding into the sunset with the church on the hill makes it seem like he's getting closer to redemption at the very least. I'm also still trying to figure out the England thing. Lieutenant Colonel Kublek is British and has a British flag in her apartment in the CR, or well, we think she's in the CR. It has occurred to me that we have no idea how they get from England to France or from England to Spain. Yeah, we really don't. It seems like I heard, and I think I put this further down, um, that it seems like I heard that they get on a boat maybe again, and because they're trying to get from England back to the US, but something goes wrong and they end up in Spain. So we're not sure exactly how that is going to work, but it seems like I read that at some point. Okay, so some other thoughts I had about what Daryl and Carol are and aren't saying. I said, excuse me, watching again, I was thinking that they specifically aren't telling one another about their hallucinations here. She says Codron really went nuts and he gets really quiet. And then he said, he, meaning Codron, thought he saw his brother. A couple of things. I'm wondering if this is a foreshadow of Daryl going nuts when he first sees Beth. Two, when she starts talking about batshit crazy, I feel like he gets self-conscious because he saw Isabel and she's calling what happened with Codron, who saw his brother, crazy. Not even sure where I'm going with that. Like, it's almost odd that he thinks of Merle right here, except that Codron thought he saw his brother. So maybe not. But I was thinking that that line that apparently got edited out, where he mentioned Merle, if it had stayed in, the random discussion about Merle would make more sense. On the other hand, maybe they specifically put this in because they cut that line out. So yeah, this is pretty much what I said. Um, and then Galadriel says, yes, when he says the thing about how young he was, that's totally insane, I feel, if you think about it. A little like Anne said, the writers are drawing a clear line in the sand. Daryl was young, Carol was not. Also, it's making me wonder exactly how young they really did want him to be in season 1. If I was going to say that, I would be thinking back to my life in my 20s at the oldest. I wouldn't say that if I was like 35 when the outbreak hit. I wouldn't consider 35 to be pretty young. He implies that his life was only just beginning. I can't think of why they'd do that unless they wanted to underline the fact that he actually wasn't as much older than Beth as people thought he was. So anyway, yeah, I think that's about all that I have for this. Just wanted to give some different people's thoughts about it, and I know that there's been lots of people posting about it in TD. So yeah, it's actually very exciting, and I agree with everyone when they say, this is them establishing what we're going to be seeing this season. Um, and it very well may not be to the end. I was just thinking that obviously we see them doing this a lot, but sometimes it's more subtle than other times. Remember back in season 4, um, the opening episode, 30 Days Without an Accident, was all of them being pretty happy and well adjusted at the prison. And we had Michonne show up. She was still looking for the governor, and she told them that she wanted to go search around Macon. And neither Daryl or Rick really liked that because they said it was really far away. They were afraid there might be some unneighborly types there. They were worried about her looking over there. And then it was never anything that was confirmed in the show, but fans figured out that Macon was where Terminus was. So they set up Macon not being a very great place, but that it was pretty far away. And there might be some not so great people over there who would not be kind or friendly to them. And then we actually saw them go there and find the not so kind or friendly people in the final episode. So TWD does this a lot. Whatever we're setting up here, we are going to end up seeing, but it may not be until the end of the season. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out. So I'll just leave it there, but thank you everyone who sent things to me and tagged me in things, and I will get you some more Ask videos later this week.